Hi, I'm James Kotecki here in the C-Space Influencer Studio at CES 2019. With me is Nicolle Pangis, the CEO of NCC Media. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So you have said that you did not know what NCC was when you first were contacted about this job. So
Right.
for those of us, at this conference that don't know, can you give us a little bit of an explanation for what you are?
Sure. So NCC, my joke is it's the biggest TV company that you've never heard of. But NCC started because all the cable operators, when they were selling advertising, could only sell in their own footprint. And it's very difficult for the buy side, the advertisers, to do national buys in the United States. So NCC was formed effectively to pull together all of the supply of the cable operators across the entire United States. So we now represent every cable company, telco, satellite in the United States, and actually cover 85 million households in 210 DMAs. So it makes it very, very easy for the buy side to buy across the entire nation and all the cable networks.
It's easy for them, but is it challenging for you because you got all these entities working together that aren't necessarily always on friendly terms at other times, or how does that work?
Actually, it works super well because I think when all these companies sort of help each other, so it's the all boats rise when they work together. And I think it happened in linear television, and I think sort of the next chapter of all boats rise is happening now, and what everybody's talking about in television is this rise of addressable, data-driven television. So I think that's the chapter 2 of NCC, is that part.
Let's talk about that chapter 2. Addressable television, addressable advertising. Where are we here at the beginning of 2019, and where are we going?
Yeah, so look, this is, what I say is that we're in the bottom of the first inning in a baseball game that's going to run into extra innings. We talk about it like it's so far along, and it's farther along than it was certainly, but we have a long way to go, right? So right now NCC has 45 million addressable households, so that's significantly more than it was a year ago and the year before that, so that's great. But we want to get to the 85 million mark like we have in linear, right? And so we're going to see incremental growth in addressable, and more addressable inventory is becoming available. And also we've been aggregating the set-top box data across our ownership, which will drive the ability to target by households more effective advertising.
And is that growth driven by people buying new televisions that can support it? Like, what are the barriers, and what are the ways it's growing naturally, and what are the ways that you kind of have to make deliberate pushes to kind of get it to those next tens of millions?
Yeah, so TV technology, different from digital, which is where I grew up. Digital sort of rose out of the ether, right? It rose out of air, out of nothing. In TV, there's a lot of systems that have been in place for literally many decades, and so it's the evolution of these systems that are required to become more digital, actually get pushed into the cloud to enable some of this data-driven advertising that we're talking about in TV. So we were talking about it, but the system simply couldn't support what we were talking about. We're at the point now where the systems actually can support, so it's about aggregating and now scaling those systems in order to make a new ecosystem that's digital-like, but in the TV world.
So if I could go out on a limb, are you saying that nobody necessarily needs to invent any new technology for this to work, but it's more of a business problem, a people problem, a rules problem to figure out how all the existing technologies need to work together?
Yes, that's right. I would say it's breaking it down. Look, technology is always going to evolve, right? And so I'm not going to say that all the systems are there, because I expect systems to continue to evolve, right? Comcast's X1 Infinity system is a great example of evolution, but that system will continue to evolve, of course, as with all TV technologies. But we're on a path now where it's about of evolution of that technology to simply streamline and make more efficient what we can already do at scale. Because 45 million households is a really good start to be able to start working with national brands, which we do now at NCC.
Something I like to ask people is there anything that you learn from the data that you have that might seem counterintuitive? Or do you learn anything interesting from that data based on what you're collecting?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've aggregated the set-top box data of all our ownership. So when a household turns on their TV, turns off their TV, what shows they've watched, for how long, what commercials they were exposed to, and what they clicked off of, those sorts of things. So that's really great data. what we found actually is that when you start working on with the advertiser side, you start looking through the data based on what the advertisers are buying and are actually surfacing, because we now have census level data as opposed to panel data in television, surfacing the fact that in some cases the marketers, the brands, are actually buying in a way that they assumed was most efficient, but when you look at the data, actually they could buy much, much more efficiently. And so we work really, really closely with brands, and it's not a perfect machine, right? People are required to actually look at the data, and we work very, very closely with clients. So this is like a collaborative, kind of consultative process. It's not a machine that kicks out an output, but we're finding that we can make the buys of the brands a lot more efficient in television to both help the brands grow and also drive more dollars into television, which has traditionally moved out of television into digital.
Sure. So we're talking about data-driven efficiencies. There's a quote, I listened to a podcast that you did last summer, and I want to quote you from this and ask you about it. You said, this is, don't worry, it's not a curveball.
Okay.
You said the biggest knock on the digital side is that we lost our way and forgot innately that advertising is about moving consumers, creating experiences for consumers. So when I heard that quote, I thought, are you trying to say that some people think that data-driven advertising does not have a soul? And are you trying to change that perception?
Well, what I meant by that is on the digital side, I did a bunch of stuff in digital. I sold and I actually ran and built data-driven technologies. And on the supply side, the publishers in digital, and we see it less now, thankfully, but there was a point in digital where a publisher would have 20 banners on their page, right? And that's an awful consumer experience, right? And so what I'm really excited about TV is, the great thing about digital is we could target really well and measure really well and give really real-time data back to our clients, and all that was really, really good. What was really bad is that the consumers kind of suffered as a result of it because we weren't thoughtful about, it probably makes sense to only have a couple of ads on a page when you're scrolling, not 30, or 30 might be an overstatement, but 10, which wasn't an overstatement, there were actually 10. And so in television, it's a very clean ecosystem right now. And so what I'm really excited about is bringing what was best in digital, which is the ability to plan, target, measure, and attribute media into television in a really clean ecosystem where you're not worrying about fraud. And if you target better on TV, the consumer experience in television could be really, really powerful, where you're connecting brands with consumers, right? Building brands and making advertising useful on the consumer side as well. So that's what I meant by that.
If you're looking at the consumer experience and you're changing the way, because you have the data, that advertisers are actually buying these ads and they're doing it in a more efficient way, does that then put pressure or influence the kinds of content that is aired and created? And does it kind of propagate back through the system to where you can imagine you're already seeing different kinds of content put out there that might not have been possible or viable before?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I don't think that's step one in the process, right? Step one in the process is simply making TV inventory more addressable, so more digital, like where we could target it first of all. 2 is pulling the data together to be able to target it well. And then 3 is sort of bridging the gap between the data and the content, which is what you're talking about. But you can't do that until you get these other kind of, the 101 in place, and then we could work on the 201 and the 301, which I think is kind of content-driven targeting at scale. Because I think you could do that now, but I think it's very, very difficult to do it at scale, and the technology hasn't caught up to do that yet.
So if we're talking again here in a year, are we talking about 2019 as having been a year of revolution or evolution?
I think a little bit of both. I think when we're talking in a year, I think we will have pulled together the scale data and actually used it on our $2 billion media business. So that is a really powerful, move in the right direction. So you could call that revolution, I guess, where you move from panel data to census data.
Sure.
I think that's probably close to revolutionary. I think more evolutionary is on the supply side, just more addressable inventory to market, going from 45 to 60 or 70. We want to get as close to that 85 that we have in linear on the addressable side as well.
Sure. I want to wrap up with a question about you. I saw that you had a number of awards on your resume, so congratulations to that. There's a lot of people here at CES who would like that kind of resume, who are looking to build their careers. Given that technology is changing everything so quickly, what advice do you have for people who are maybe at the start of their careers today?
Yeah, so one I would say is that we think of careers as very linear, and one of the things that I've done is my career has not been linear at all. I didn't go through one team. I went from sales to business development to sort of strategic stuff to product management when I had never even written a requirements document, and so just being a constant student I think is really, really important. And two, I would say just be out of your comfort zone more than you are comfortable. You know, like if you take your day and you split it in half, make sure it's not, more time, I shouldn't say in half, but 75% of the time try to be uncomfortable in what you're doing and 25 comfortable, right? Because it's the 75 that you learn the most, whether it's networking, doing work that is sort of out of your scope or out of your comfort level because you're not comfortable, so you kind of stay away from it. You should lean into it and just constantly learn, because to your point, technology is moving and you have to understand it, and if you lean out, you're gonna lose your momentum in your career. I think it's becoming really, really important to know it.
Sure. Well, I don't know what it says about me, but I have felt like this was a very comfortable conversation, so I really appreciate you joining me here in the C-Space Influencer
Thanks for
Studio.
having me. I appreciate
Nicolle
it.
Pangis of NCC Media. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I'm James Kotecki here in the C-Space Influencer Studio. CES 2019 is happening all around us. Keep it right here for more great conversations about the future.